Hello book lovers and welcome back or welcome to Nakhat's Bookish Cafe. Today I'm here to read 1-star reviews of all the books that I've given 5 stars so far in 2024. I've always wanted to do a video where I read other people's reviews, whether it is reading 1-star reviews for books I really enjoy or reading 5-star reviews for books that I have very much disliked. And I figured that this was kind of a good opportunity for me to do that kind of video while also letting you know here at the halfway point all the books that I have rated 5 stars so far. So these are all the books that I have read through the end of June. At this point, I believe I've read 73 books and I've rated only 12 of them 5 stars. I am a little picky when it comes to my ratings. I am definitely a 4-star girly, but there were a few books this year that definitely won those 5 stars fair and square. Now, I will say that especially towards the beginning of this list, a lot of them are continuations of series, so I'm going to work really hard to find reviews that are not spoilery, but I do want you to go ahead and keep that in mind when watching this in case there are any books that you want to go ahead and skip, or if you just don't feel comfortable watching this video because you want to read those books and just don't want to have any sort of spoilers whatsoever, I completely understand. That being said, since there are 12 books here, I'm thinking I'll probably read about 2 to 3 1-star reviews for each book, just so that this video doesn't get too long. I'm gonna do my best to be nice, but I'm very protective of the books that I love. Most of us are, and I may definitely question what the heck these people are thinking, because I think I have a pretty good taste in books. Honestly, I think I rate books relatively fair, and it sometimes surprises me that a book that I have absolutely loved could be so disliked by someone. I'm not someone who gives out 1 stars very often. In fact, I haven't given out a single 1 star this year, and I don't think I had any last year. I might have had like 1. So for me, a 1-star book is a book I hate. Like, if I had to attend a book burning, I would Colby that book into the pits of hell. I find it problematic. I find it offensive. I think the writing is terrible. I think everything about the book is terrible. I think there's no redeeming factors to it whatsoever. So for someone to give a book that I love 1 star, hurts a little bit, to be honest. Now, I do understand that a lot of people rate differently. What they see as a 1 star could just be like, I didn't like this book. Didn't like it. You know, it could be as simple as that, or maybe they did hate it. So we will see. We will go in with an open mind, but I will definitely be judging these people. I will be questioning their reading tastes for sure. So without further ado, let's go ahead and jump in. I'm hoping to share my screen. I will read everything out loud just because I have had technical difficulties in the past. So fingers crossed that doesn't happen. But we're going to go ahead and head over to my Goodreads and we'll go ahead and take a look at those 12 books. All right, so I made myself a little bit shorter here just so I'm a little bit more level with my computer in case I look like I'm a little further down than I was. All right, so we are going to go in the order in which I read these. So the first 5-star of the year was actually a reread for me. I was rereading it in preparation for the second book. And unfortunately, the second book once again got pushed back and it's not going to be released until either late this year or early 2025. But that book is Iron Widow by Sharon J. Shao, and I absolutely love this young adult sci-fi story based in kind of a sci-fi world that is inspired by ancient China. And I do believe our main character is inspired by a very powerful Chinese empress. So during this video, I'm not really going to give my reviews and I'm not really going to give a synopsis for the books or anything. I might go ahead and show this to you. So if you want to pause and kind of read through it, or of course, if you want to go ahead and check it out on your own time, that's totally fine. But I'm not going to be doing that in this video just so that we're moving along a little bit more. But I might give you some basic information like genre, age group, and things like that. So let's go ahead and go to the ratings section. So let's scroll past all the stuff that I don't care about. Where are the ratings? So ratings and reviews. So how do I get to just 1-star reviews? So these are the people that's okay. So here we go. So very few people have given this book 1 star. Not surprising. It is a very popular book. A lot of people really love this book. So it looks like 2,308 people, 2% of those who have marked it as read have given this 1 star. So let's go ahead and take a look at what they didn't like about it. So let's see what Sophia has to say, and hopefully it's not so long. Dang, why do these 1-star people got like so much to say? Like, I just want a short, so I'm not going to read everything that they have to say because they got a lot to say. So she says, I'm upset that a book marketed as a feminist breakthrough only portrays feminism as something extremely violent, which is actually a harmful stereotype that this book, which prides itself on breaking stereotypes, perpetrates. It's supposed to be this revolutionary feminist book, but it just preserves misogynistic ideas under the guise of being empowering. So I'm going to go ahead and disagree with that because I think I'm the kind of person who agrees with women's rights and women's wrongs, just to put it that way. But I'm also the kind of person who thinks that if you have been oppressed for a very long time and there has been no changes through the proper channels, that you do have the right to get a little bit violent. So I mean, this person is in a society that respects strength and prowess on the battlefield. So that's what she needs to display in order to get what she wants, to be seen as valuable enough to make a difference. So I think that her being not violent, her being a demure woman who's like, oh, let me use my feminine wiles, or let me just be really intellectual or something and just try to change laws legally, was not going to work. It's not going to work in a world that has been at war since the very beginning and that values its fighters the most. That wasn't going to work in this kind of story. So I don't really know what this reviewer was hoping would happen or what she wanted to see. But I do think that the way that our author went about this was perfectly fine. And that being said, I would say that our character is definitely morally gray, and some people would consider her a bit of a villain. Like, if you look for story recommendations of like villainous characters who are the main characters, or almost like a villain arc or a villain origin story, this story is gonna come up. She's not a good person, all right? She is the bad guy that gets shit done. So I think that this person went into the story with the wrong idea of what they would be getting, and then we're disappointed by that. For all its sweeping talk about breaking barriers and supporting women, which I do love, just not paired with what actually happens in this book, it's surprisingly shallow. Every female character besides Satan either dies, is vain, man-obsessed, conceited misogynist. I really dislike how Satan is supposed to be some savior to open the eyes of the world, only to keep saying how much women annoy her and how much she hates being a woman. She also kills a woman for that reason, that she was protecting her family. So there is a scene where she does kill someone who was like, I did what I had to do to protect my family, but at the same time you could tell that it was more than that, you know, more than her just trying to protect her family. Like, she definitely did not like what Zaytan and the others were trying to achieve. So I wouldn't say like she just killed her for wanting to protect her family. That definitely takes a lot from the situation away. I wouldn't say that she's exactly a woman hater. I didn't walk away thinking that. I definitely think that she was surrounded by a lot of weak women. I think that was to show how women do contribute to the patriarchy and that women make things worse for other women, which is a reality of the situation. In this case, it is kind of our woman against the world, and she has very few allies. Where the author will go with this in the future, I'm not sure, but I personally didn't have a problem with this. This book didn't exactly promise girl power in the form of female friendship. It was very much inspired by an empress who stands above all and does shit on her own. So, you know, I mean, I can definitely understand why that would upset you, that other women in the story were not shown in the best of light. But when it comes to feminism, there are plenty of women who work to uphold the patriarchy, and sometimes you have to beat those women down a little bit to benefit womankind as a whole. So that's my opinion on that. Let's move on to another person. Okay, so Ams says, once again, a really long one. So she says, welcome to your gaslight gatekeep girl boss nightmare. If there's anything Iron Widow succeeded in doing, it's filling me with feminist rage. Feminist rage over how very little feminism on top of a multitude of other things this book had promised but delivered so badly. I cannot recommend this book to anyone in good faith. The brutal truth is Saran is very fortunate their YouTube career took off and subsequently aided in their book's success because this book is so poorly and thoughtlessly written. Disagree. Its success can only be driven by and will continue to depend on their internet fame. I think at this point, Iron Widow is so well loved and talked about within the book community, both on Instagram and YouTube. I have seen it. I'm not on Book Talk, so I don't know about that, but I'm pretty sure that the author can kind of coast on the fame of this first book without their internet career, no problem. So the biggest irony is that this book and their character Wu Zitan emulates almost every single element Ziran criticized about the live action Mulan. I don't know anything about that because I don't watch her stuff. Chinese culture is used for superficial embellishment, meaningless character deaths, cannon fodder, a series of completely illogical events. I don't think there was any meaningless character deaths, but then again, just random people were dying, and they were dying in a war, which is what happens. And they were dying during a shift in power, which also happens. So it just does. I wouldn't say their deaths are meaningless. It's just the way things work in these kind of situations. So cannon fodder, yes, for sure, but I don't think that's the author's fault. I think that's just how war works. You're not going to come across many wars where there's not cannon fodder. They just throw as many people as they can at the enemy, and who survives, survives. It's kind of how it works. A series of completely illogical events. I didn't really think they were illogical. I always kind of followed where the author was going and was never like, why is that happening? So I would go ahead and disagree with this. I can't comment on any sort of Chinese history because I don't know a lot about Chinese history, to be honest. And I think the author kind of was like, it's loosely inspired. So you can't be like, oh my gosh, this is like not like Chinese history. Well, of course not. No. So she did not like, she said this book is oversaturated with purple prose, that it reads like a middle school assignment on how to use similes. I mean, an author can have fun with their writing. I enjoy purple prose every once in a while. In fact, I don't like when a book is too straightforward and boring. In fact, I'm reading a book right now where I'm like, this writing is very bland. So that is something I disagree with. Overly ambitious storytelling that Saran writes is simply not strong enough to tackle in a large part because of the narrative issues. Hundun Hundun invasion, Satan's rise to power, and then something that's blurred out. So maybe it's a spoiler. So I thought that the book was relatively well paced. I think that it got a lot done. Could a book like this be fleshed out? Yes, you can always make a book in a fantasy or sci-fi setting longer. You could tell them more about the history. You could tell them more about the way things in the world currently are working. You could introduce new characters in different places so that you get a broader sense of the world. You can always do that. But, you know, sometimes having a slightly shorter book is not that bad. Okay, we don't need that much information. I think we got enough. I knew what was happening throughout the entire story. I was never confused. I never felt like the author skimped on any information that we needed. I did not need a 500-page book or anything along that. I think this is going to be just a duology, and I think authors need to realize it's okay to do just a duology. We don't need trilogies and, you know, 10-book series or anything. Sometimes short and sweet. If you're a good enough author, you can do it. You can do it, and I think that this author did it. So that's my opinion on that. It says there's no emotional dynamic between Satan and her deceased sister, considering that her sister is a catalyst for spurring Satan's call to adventure. We're given absolutely nothing about the sister's character. She's dead. So that's why we don't know anything about her. Yes, she is the catalyst for all of this, but that doesn't mean that she needs to be a huge part of the story, because Satan is not just doing this for her sister, she's doing it for herself and all the women that are still alive. So we don't need to be like spending a ton of time on this lady who is, no offense, dead and no longer really relevant to the story. So I honestly didn't really notice her absence or anything, but if that's something that you want, then it's not in the story. So sorry. All right, so we spent a lot of time on this first book just because all of their little quotes were very long. So let's go ahead and move on to the second book here, which is, I believe, jumping into a book that continues a series, specifically the last book in a series, and that is going to be the last book of this Heaven Official Blessing series right here. So let's go ahead and pull it up. Heaven Officials Blessing, Volume 8. All right. So this is the last book in a series, but essentially this is a, what do they call them? Danmi, I want to say, something along the lines that they call it. And I'm not going to show you the synopsis for it because it is the last book in a series. But essentially we are following a god who has ascended to godhood for the third time. He's kind of risen and fallen. He's had a very unlucky 800 years. He's gone through a lot, and he has a very devoted worshiper who he starts to develop a bit of a romantic relationship with. It is the king of slow burns, okay? The king of slow burns. If you want a slow burn, check this out. And I really enjoyed the series. I'm going to be honest, the 8th book was the only one that I gave 5 stars, but all the others were kind of like 4.5 stars. Had a good time with it. The last book completes the series and then also has a collection of short stories that take place after the series as well. So the 5 stars was for me enjoying the ending of the series as well as enjoying the short stories. So let's see if I can find anything that is not spoilery. Okay, so it looks like there are literally only 8 1-star ratings, which is not surprising. If you have read 7 volumes of this, chances are you enjoy the writing, you enjoy the characters, you enjoy the plot. You know, if you've stuck around this long out of hate, then I suggest you find other ways to spend your time. So let's see what these 8 people did not like about it. I'm genuinely curious. Like, how do you get this far in a series and then just go like, that sucked? All right, I just spent thousands of pages with these characters and I hate them. So let's see. Hidden because of spoilers. Oh my god, is there only one? Okay, so there's only one review and it has spoilers. So let me check it out and then I will go ahead and just read off what's non-spoilery. It says, worst cop-out ending ever, and somehow the plot in this book was even more incoherent than previous ones, which is impressive considering how little of a plot was left after the fourth book. Just no. So why didn't you stop reading after the fourth book? Like, why are you still here? Clearly there was something that was keeping you coming back. Either that or you're like a masochist. The writing was so rushed. The series would have been so much better if it was all put into 4 books or less. As after the 4th book, it all went nowhere. And it wasn't until the middle of the 8th book where it literally used the goddamn power of love to fix everything and stop the god of the universe. The things took off. Massive disappointment. The series had a great concept but failed in execution due to lazy writing. So it kind of seemed like this person has not enjoyed the series for a few books. So of course they're going to be disappointed when they stop liking it at book 4 and read 4 books that they did not enjoy. So I don't know why they continued. It's okay to DNF, guys. If you don't like a series, DNF. Is this book sometimes incoherent? Yes, sometimes I genuinely had no idea what was going on, and sometimes that did frustrate me. And I will say that at times I rated some of the other books lower because of that, but that's just the way that this author writes. It is a series where they, I think, write like weekly chapters. So I'm assuming they just kind of went with the flow. These books were just supposed to be a continuous story. They were never supposed to like be broken up into these volumes. The way that the volumes are broken up is weird. It'll stop like in the middle of a plot point at the end of one book and then continue that plot point until like a third of the way through the next book and then start a new plot point in that. It was weird, okay? So that's just something to keep in mind. I think that this book was just a fun, addictive read. Sometimes weird things happened. Sometimes there was too many characters and you didn't know what the heck was going on. It jumps timelines so often that sometimes you don't know where or when you are. So this is the kind of book I always say you should binge. You should binge this series because I know in the beginning I didn't do that, and every time I picked up a book, I was so confused. So if you're interested in reading the series, definitely binge all 8 of them. I had a fun time. I think this is kind of one of those books that on the one hand takes a lot of thought because of all the characters and all the timelines and all the different events that have happened in this person's 800-year life, but at the same time is kind of a head empty book because it does have some flaws. It's one of those books that I went into for a good time. I had a good time with it. And as far as the ending being solved by the power of love, I think that's okay sometimes. I think the power of love, which can translate to the power of worship, which when we're dealing with gods is completely fine. Worship, love makes a god more powerful. So I think it's completely reasonable for that to be the solution to everyone's problems, but that's just me. So anyway, I think we're just dealing with someone who is a little salty about the fact that they spent 4 books reading a book that they didn't enjoy, and they would have benefited from not continuing the series. So that is the 1-star review for this book, at least where they wrote something to validate their 1 star. So let's go ahead and move on to the next book. So the next 2 books are actually from the same series. So this one is going to be Gloam, which is book 4. It's book 4 of the Monstrous series, and you're actually going to see 3 of the books from this series on here. I have really been enjoying this series, so I've just been giving them 5 stars. So hopefully we can find some that aren't too spoilery. Most of these books are somewhat standalones, but there is an overarching plot kind of drizzled into each of those books. So we're going to kind of try to avoid that. But overall, I think most of the reviewers will probably be focusing on the relationship aspect of this book. Okay, so once again, we have very few 1-star ratings, which isn't surprising at this point. We are 4 books into the series. You have either read the first book and decided, yes, I like this author, I like the characters, I like the world, or you have decided you don't and just haven't continued to read the book. So let's go ahead and jump into the 1 stars and see if any of them wrote anything. So the only person that wrote something DNF'd this book at 83. So we don't really have any 1 star reviews. I don't know how this person DNF'd this book. I absolutely love these characters so much. And the villain in this story, I wanted to see her die. So I was like, I'm not going to stop until she's dead. So not sure how they did that, but to each their own. So let's go ahead and move on. And this is once again going to be a book in this series. It's going to be book 5, and that book is called Moth. And I would say that Moth right now is my absolute favorite in this series. So this book I absolutely loved, and I will hear absolutely no criticism. So hopefully whoever gave it 1 star decided to not write a review. So let's see, even less. 13 people gave this book 1 star. Let's see if anyone wrote a review on it. Okay, so into book 5, and this is the most fluffiest end of the world dystopian series I've ever read. It's an utter disappointment. So let me get this straight. All monsters hate him, but they're all dating, holding hands, skipping and smooching their humans. Right. So I'm thinking that this person picked up this book without picking up the rest of the series. That's kind of what it sounds like. It doesn't really sound like this person has read any of the other books, because at this point, if you're in book 5 and you haven't realized that these dystopian monster romances are actually pretty fluffy, then you're a little slow. But that being said, these books are not dark romances. I would not consider them dark romances. There's definitely dark things that happen. People die. Some of our monsters have been tortured or experimented on by humans, and sometimes our humans get hurt and bad things have happened. There's cults. The military is very corrupt. So there are bad things that happen, but I would not say that this is a dark romance. So I would not go into the series thinking that. I don't think there's a lot of people that describe this book as a dark romance. So I don't know where this person got that information. But that being said, Moth is half monster, half human. And so he is kind of a character that doesn't really belong to either part of the world. Monsters don't really accept him. And when they say monsters, they're not really talking about our monsters that we have seen throughout the story, because our monsters, they're a little bit different. Just like humans, they are not all the same. So they are less discriminatory against humans than other monsters. A lot of monsters are, because humans kill them and capture them and torture them. So they have a pretty good reason to hate humans. So they don't really like Moth because he's a human. And humans don't like him because he's part monster, and they are scared of monsters because they kind of invaded their world and set about the apocalypse. So, you know, all of them have pretty good reasons not to like him. He has also kind of developed a very big wall. So it's very hard to get to know him. So even those who maybe potentially want to try, go ahead and eventually give up because he doesn't really open up to people. That being said, I don't know why it says all monsters hate him, but they're dating, holding hands, skipping and smooching their humans. I feel like the person in this story doesn't realize that the humans and the monsters that we're following are just built different. Okay, they're not like your everyday human who fears monsters, and they're not like everyday monsters that hate humans. So it's different. Okay, so my thing is, I feel like this person just kind of misunderstood the situation and didn't read the rest of the series, and so doesn't really understand what's going on. So that is probably why they were disappointed. So I'm gonna say that's not a very good representation of this story. It's just a little bit of a misunderstanding. All right, so let's move into our next series, which is, I don't remember which one it is. I want to say it's book 5 of the Criminal Intentions series by Cole McCade. And this is also the first time I gave a 5-star in this series, even though I absolutely love this series. There it is. I don't know why it showed other things that I am not reading. So I absolutely love Cole McCade. I love all his writing. I don't think I've ever given any of his books less than, I think the first book in the series I might have given a 3.5, but that was just because I went into that book thinking that it would be a standalone and then we would have companion novels. I didn't know that it was like the first book in a continuous series, and so I was like, this pacing's weird and I don't understand what's happening. So that was on me. That's not Cole McCade's fault. But other than that, I think I've given mostly 4 stars or more. And this is the 6th book in the series. And I went ahead and gave it 5 stars. In this book, we are following a couple of detectives, and they're homicide detectives in Baltimore, and they are forming a slow romance with each other. And it looks like we got very few 1 stars, only 6 of them, which once again, with continuations of series, not surprising. Usually at this point, you have weeded out the people that don't like the series. Honestly, I feel like there was so much character development and relationship development in the story, and that the mystery that they were following in this book was the most interesting up to this point. So it's very surprising to me that anyone would give this book 1 star while having decided to continue with the series up to this point. That looks like it's not in English. Panejo escribe Resana. I don't know what that means. I'm gonna be totally honest, and I'm scared to move away from this page to look up what it means, because sometimes my recording device, once I change screens, like doesn't stop. So I don't know what that means, but someone was unhappy with the book, and that's a shame for them. So this book is incredible. I really think that you should check out Cole McCade. I think he has incredible writing, and the series, Sanjay and Malcolm, especially Sanjay, I love them so much, and I really find no fault with the series. So sorry, person who disagrees with me. All right, so the next one is the last book that is a continuation of a series, and then we have a couple standalones, and then we do have one more from the Monstrous series. But this is The Kingdom of Gods by N.K. Jemisin. This is the 3rd and final book in the Inheritance trilogy. Once again, we will go ahead and make sure that there are no spoilers. I haven't been showing you the synopsis for these books just because they are continuations in a series and I don't want to spoil anything for you. But I would say with the Inheritance trilogy, they are continuations, but each time like a few hundred years or something has passed between them. So it's not like we're following the same characters or even really the same plot line. So it shouldn't be like overly spoilery, but we're still going to be careful. Don't worry. So here we go. It looks like most of the people that I follow have given it relatively high ratings. Well, 3.5, 5 star. I agree. 3 stars. So I gave it 5 stars. This book made me cry. I'm going to be honest. Okay. So this book has 278 1 stars, but it's still only 1% of those who have read it. So let's take a look at those 1 star reviews and see what people have to say about it. So if this had been the first book, I wouldn't have read the other 2. In fact, after reading this one, I went back, reread the first one to try to recall what I had liked about the series in the first place. What? Oh yeah, the book had consistent character development, measured pacing, and a coherent plot. I didn't hate The Kingdom of Gods, really. Reading the book was kind of like visiting a good friend from middle school, but discovering she's gotten really into Scientology, and that's all she wants to talk about now. It's nice to see her and all, but also confusing and uncomfortable. And I don't really want to get together again. I don't know what to make of that, other than I'm assuming they had a big break between reading the first 2 and the 3rd one, and maybe they've had a change of heart. I'm gonna be honest and sound maybe a little ignorant, but I don't know what Scientology is. So if that was present in the book, I don't know. This book is very much rooted in like religion because we are following gods. But other than that, if you didn't think a book about gods would have anything to do with religion, then I don't know what to say. But again, I don't know what Scientology is, so can't really comment on that. Why do these people all have old portraits? Like that looks like an old portrait and that looks like an old portrait. Like, what's going on here, guys? All right, this book, both metaphorically and in plot essence, is a clusterfuck. What the word? Let me explain. Just so you know, I did not finish reading it at about 70%, nor did I intend to do it. I can, however, give you a disgruntled summary of what you may expect. So, the word is an apt description of the main plot. The silver lining of the Inheritance series, an incestuous polyamorous affair between 2 male gods and 1 female god, went awry. Okay, and we do follow Say in this. I feel like that might get into spoilers, so we're not going to talk about that. In this god, it does have incest because they're gods and they were the only 3 people, and they were technically related, but they were, I don't think you would consider them like biologically related, but that being said, they started creating children called godlings because that's what gods do. They create things. And sometimes those godlings do sleep with each other and sometimes they sleep with their parents. And maybe that's weird for humans, but it's normal for gods, and it honestly didn't weird me out at all because I'm like, they're gods. It's everything is related to them, everything is made of them, so unless they are asexual beings, they're gonna sleep with something they're related to. Is it weird that they're sleeping with their children? A little bit, yeah, but it's just the way that it is. So this person only managed to get halfway through it. The series morphed into bisexual gods having sex. I feel like there wasn't a lot of sex in this series. Like, I get in the 3rd book, I think maybe there was the most, but I understand why the author did it based off where the story goes, which I'm not going to talk about because it's spoilery, but this is not like an erotic story. There's a lot more to it. Fortunately, I'd read N.K. Jemisin's later books first and enjoyed them. Had I started with this series, I would have missed out. So they're kind of saying they would not have read more beyond this book, but I just want to say that this is not just a book about gods having sex, so just an FYI. There's a lot more to the plot. This was disappointing mainly because it was confusing as hell for the first half of the book and nothing else. See, I feel like a lot of people get confused by N.K. Jemisin books because I had no problem understanding her books, at least with the Inheritance trilogy, and as well as the Dreamblood duology, which is sitting over here. I always had a general idea of what was going on. Did I know specifically everything at all times? No. But when they talk about like the Broken Earth trilogy, they're like, oh, it's the most confusing book I've ever read. And now people are saying this book was confusing as well. I thought that her story was relatively easy to understand. Maybe I was just along for the ride. I just enjoyed the characters. I liked what they were doing. I liked the messaging. I was just kind of chilling, but I did not find the story to be confusing. In fact, when I talk about the story, I often say that I think it's a good place for people who are looking to get into adult fantasy to start, because I genuinely knew what was going on and I thought that her writing was well done. So disagree on that. So it says, I thought some things that were left unanswered in the first book would be answered now. Alas, that did not happen. So like I kind of mentioned, these stories are not picking up on the previous plot point. They are following different characters, years, generations, centuries in the future. So you have to be okay with like a somewhat open ending and potentially just maybe getting a few ties here and there based off of things people say have happened, or just based off of using context clues of where we are here and now. But the author is not going to spell out anything for you, and some things may be left unsaid. And I don't think I ever had any specific questions where I was like, dang, I was really hoping the author would answer that. But like I said, with the series, I was kind of just along for the ride. So that's just me. And this person says, whoopsie. I cannot continue with this one at this point. It feels like I'm torturing myself. Sorry to hear that. Anyway, that is the Broken Earth Kingdom. It seems like a lot of people were either confused by it, they did not like the fact that this one was a bit more relationship and sex forward than the other ones, or they felt like it wasn't a good continuation of the series and they kind of felt like the author was ignoring the first two books, which, like I said, I would almost view these more as companion novels than as a solid series continuation. But I love this book. The ending I thought was absolute, what the heck are these, get out of here. I absolutely love the way that the series ended. I thought it was very satisfying, and honestly, I would not have ended the series any other way. And I think N.K. Jemisin is a very intelligent woman who is very talented at writing. So that is that on that. Now, moving on to the first book that is not part of a series. Now, this book is actually a nonfiction, and I would be very surprised if anyone gave it 1 star, because this is going to be beautiful, 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 beautiful boy. And this is about a father. It's his memoir about his son's addiction. And I feel like if you read a story about a father struggling to interact with a son who's going through drug addiction, and he's talking about his experience and the research that he did, and you rate it 1 star, I think you're kind of a bad person. I'm gonna be honest, if anyone rates this 1 star, I'm gonna be like, massive side eye. Like, I get it, maybe you don't like his writing, or maybe you thought the story dragged too much, maybe you didn't like the way he presented the stories, maybe reading about drug addiction makes you uncomfortable. I don't know. But 1 star for someone who's like bearing his soul and talking about one of the most difficult parts of his life, one of the most painful parts of his life, couldn't be me. Could not be me. So let me show the synopsis real quick. So if you want to go ahead and pause and read that real quick, be my guest. As you can tell, it was turned into a movie, which I still need to watch, even though I know it will make me sob my eyes out. So something to look forward to. There's my review. So let's see. Wow. 637 not so good people rated this book 1 star. Let's see what you could potentially not like about this. Okay, so let's see. What I pictured the entire time I was reading this flaming hot turd. Kelly, you're kind of a B word. Okay, I'm the cool dad. That's my thing. I don't know if she's trying to say that the dad thought he was the cool dad, or what. Nothing like being a privileged white condescending jackass, total enabler who spends his kid's formative years bragging about his own drug use and then remains in a constant state of denial about how fucked his kid is for eternity. And even better, the kid apparently needed fucking psychiatric help his entire goddamn life, but was never taken to anything but a therapist who was another piece of shit and only offered boys will be boys and all kids go through phases because cool dad is super cool and should never subject his perfect beautiful boy to something that could actually help him. So I will admit that this character did not always handle the situation the best, and he admits that. Like, he knows mistakes were made. He questions things that he did. No one is a perfect parent. No one knows what the hell they're doing when they're a parent. So I think holding this guy to some sort of perfect standard is unrealistic. Yes, therapy could have been used more, but based off of when this was all going down, I don't think therapy was as big as it is nowadays. Like, people weren't just putting their kids into therapy back in the day. You know, only the most cuckoo people were going to therapy. Only the most messed up people were going to therapy, which is probably why he didn't go until he started drugs, you know? So do I think that this father made mistakes? Do I think that they should have intervened sooner? Do I think that the view that teenagers rebel in certain ways can be harmful because it makes it seem like it's normal. Yes, 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 yes. I agree to all of that, but I don't think that he is a bad father. And this person clearly thinks that he spent too much time trying to be the cool dad when really he was just trying to be the dad who didn't know what the hell he was doing, which is unfortunate, but that's just how most dads are. They don't know what they're doing. Because why would they? Especially when their kid starts going into drugs. And he made it clear that his son was suffering from drug addiction pretty early in the drug crisis. So it wasn't like there were a ton of other people who were going through that. But at the same time, it made it clear that he was reaching out to like literally everyone that he could. I felt like he was really desperate to find answers and to help his son as much as he could. So I don't think that this book is craps. This is a book full of numerous examples of how over-idealization of a son by a father can cause so many problems as insufficient attention paid to the child. If you believe this father, his son was nothing short of the second coming. It is true. He thinks very highly of his son. Most parents do. I mean, most people aren't like, my kid sucks, you know, he's dumb, he doesn't know how to do anything. Most people think that their kid is really great. And from what I read, it seems like his kid was a pretty good dude. And he had some flaws. And when those showed, I thought that the father intervened and brought it up. And did he always bring it up in a way that resolved the issue? No, but I thought that he acknowledged it, which not all parents do. So some of them really do just turn a completely blind eye to what their kid is doing. But yeah, this is not a perfect father. He's not out here to say that he was a perfect father and that he handled the situation greatly, because his son is still a drug addict. To this day, his son is still a drug addict. So he's in no way trying to be like, this is how I was the perfect dad with the perfect son who had like just a little dip in life. He had some problems, but that's all better now because we're so great. No, this is the real and dirty truth about the fact that his son got a drug addiction. Maybe they didn't catch it early enough. Maybe they didn't do the right things. Maybe there was no right thing to do. And their son to this day is still a drug addict. And that's just something that they have to live with and handle the best way that they can. So I think these people are being a little bit harsh. And I'm wondering if any of them have ever dealt with a kid or had a kid with drug addiction. So that is my opinion on that. I think they're just being a little bit harsh. I mean, we have to understand this is probably, other than your child like actually dying, one of the most difficult things that a parent could ever go through. So a little bit of empathy would have gone a long way with those reviews. But that is my opinion on it. So up next we have, oops, did I accidentally go to my page instead of where I wanted to go? The next book is going to be The Spirit Bears Its Teeth by Andrew Joseph White. This is a book that I selected for a book club that I was invited to. And we went ahead and had a live show for that. So I will go ahead and link that down below. That was on Is Bailey's reading channel. So if you want to go ahead and check that out. Here is the review for the story. This is a young adult historical horror featuring a trans main character, and there are some paranormal aspects to the story as well. All right, so looking at the reviews, it looks like less than 1% of people have given this book 1 star, which is great to see because I really enjoyed this book, obviously. And I really enjoyed this author in general. I've also, look, the book is right here. I have also read Hell Followed With Us, and that was a great story as well. So let's take a look real quick. It looks like we have a few reviews here. So let's start with Librarian. So this book opens with a letter from the author which states content warnings, blah, 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 blah. This book is not a necessary procedure, da, 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 da. I should have listened and put it down then. This book is definitely not for everyone. The publisher has stated that it is YA, but it reads much more adult. I will say when we were reading this, a lot of us were a little bit surprised that this book was considered young adult. I think our character is potentially only 16, 17, so that's probably why it is considered young adult, but it does get pretty gruesome. Anytime I talk about this book, I say check out the trigger warnings. It is not for the faint of heart, for sure. So the author warns readers that there is extensive medical gore. Okay, so essentially this was a librarian who was reading it, and she gave it 1 star because she doesn't feel like it's right for the audience that she bought it for, which I think is a little unfair to punish the book for maybe bad marketing, but to each their own, I guess. So let's check out another one from Kyrie. And it says, I wasn't sure I'd enjoy this Stonewall Honor book because horror is not my favorite genre. It very nearly went into my DNF pile. It's like The Orphanage in Jane Eyre, only with creepy doctors who are trying to figure out why young ladies with violet eyes can contact spirits. Under the guise of helping cure them, they punish, spoiler maybe, those who do not cooperate. Defining cooperation is difficult because Headmaster Forrester is the only one who decides. So once again, it just seems like someone who wasn't really into horror and got a little bit more than they were expecting. So there's that. I did DNF this book. It was too slow for me. I would pick it up and just put it down 10 seconds later. I don't know if it was because it was YA and I mostly read adult. The ideas were there, but the pacing of the writing did not keep me interested. I do enjoy a slightly slower build when it comes to my horror stories. It's not a thriller. I don't need it to be fast-paced or anything. And I thought that the ending was exciting and climactic enough, which is kind of the way that I like it. A slow build and then a very exciting climactic ending. But this person clearly likes a faster paced horror situation. They said, I did find the characters a little service-based. I don't know what that means. I'm gonna be honest. Service-based. Does that mean that they are just catering to like a certain population? So I don't know what that means. Anyway, moving on. It says, FYI, the term autism was first coined in 1908. So much for historical setting. So I think she gave it 1 star because she thought that it was not historically accurate, which that is okay. You know, I feel like at that point you're just nitpicking. And this book sounds like it was made for me, then disappointed me in ways I didn't know possible in a DNF. So I think a lot of it had to do with the fact that this book is just too gory to be considered like a YA story. I would feel more comfortable pushing it towards new adult or a very young adult story. So young adult, but not a young adult. You know, I never get why it's called young adult. To me, a young adult is like 18 to 21, but apparently it's like 12 to 18. I don't even know. But to me, that's a teenager. The word adult should not be used for that age group. But anyway, so yeah, it was just too gory for some people. Some people thought it was too slow paced, and someone didn't like the historic inaccuracies about the book, about people who could see ghosts and have violet eyes. So okay, this video is going to be kind of long, but that's okay. So we are moving on to the next book, which is The Heart's Invisible Furies. Whoops, I guess I was not in the box when I said that. The Heart's Invisible Furies. So this was a very unexpected 5-star for me. I almost unhauled this book. It was one of my challenge books that I was reading for my challenge cup, and I ended up loving it. In fact, my mom read it too and loved it, and then she went and got 2 of his books from the library. So she's reading another one of his books because she loved his writing so much. So here is the synopsis for it if you would like to go ahead and pause and check out what this book is. It is a historical story. We are following the life of a young queer man who lives in Ireland, and we follow him from like the ages of like 9, 10, all the way through to him being an elderly man. So that is what that is about. Let's take a look and see what people thought of it. So very few people gave it 1 star. This is a rather long book, so I'll be surprised. I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of the 1 stars are DNFs because it is over 500 pages. So if you're not enjoying it, I'm assuming you're DNFing it. But we will go ahead and take a look and see what people had to say. DNF. DNF'd. About halfway through the book. And thought that was a shame. The writing is excellent, it sure is, and the characterization of Cyril Avery was flawless, but it's just too foul. Vulgar, disrespectfully vulgar. I'm gonna say the first part of the story where he first meets his friend whose name I am currently forgetting. So let me actually go up to the synopsis real quick and recheck out what his friend's name is, because Julian. When he first meets Julian, it is a little bit vulgar, especially when they're young boys, because Julian is very obsessed with sex, and that kind of continues on throughout his life. And while they don't talk about it as much later in their life, that first part of the book where he first meets Julian and he's kind of like, they talk about stuff that boys talk about, it can get a little bit vulgar, and I was kind of like, oh, but that does disappear a little bit later in the book, and it's just kind of like when they're really young. So it didn't bother me too much or anything like that, but this person clearly did not enjoy it. Is it really plausible that every Catholic priest you meet is a pedophile? According to Boyle's narrative, it seemed to be, and that's just not the storyline I'm willing to continue reading. I'm trying to remember if it said anything about Catholic priests being pedophiles. I know that he mentioned a couple times going into the church, mostly so that he could interact with other men, and I don't think he was referring to them as pedophiles, and probably was brought up once or twice because it happens, you know, more than potentially in other career options, but I don't remember it being like a huge part of the story. It is not shining a bright, shiny light onto the church. The church hurts people in this book, and it was very powerful in Ireland during this time, and it really hurt women and queers, and that's primarily the people that we're following. So if you're looking for a book that has a good outlook on the church, don't read a book about women and queers in a time where the church was severely oppressing them and also kind of killing them. So just a heads up for that, in case you're thinking about picking up this book. So let's see. Knowing that reviewing a book you could not finish is not good form. So once again, another DNF. Couldn't make it very first. Not past 7-year-old Cyril and a 7-year-old friend having advanced sexual discussion. Like I said, the sexual discussions when they are young, his friend Julian is very much sex obsessed, I'm gonna be honest. So there is that. So let's see. Then we have, I came to this book with incredibly high expectations. Everyone that reads it praises this, and its rating on Goodreads is very impressive. The book has now taught me to never ever trust any of that. Ever. Don't trust anyone. They're all liars. So it started on the right foot, pulled me in with the story of a young girl that's been kicked out of the church, This is when I started to question reading the next 650 plus pages. I had so many issues. Oh my god. Once again, it seems like no one could get past the point where Julian and Cyril were young boys and were having conversations about sex. Like, no one could get past. It is a part of the story, and it did sometimes make me a little bit uncomfortable, but that part of the story does end. Okay, I swear it ends. So it's not what the whole story is about. You just have to get through it. I don't know any little boys. I did not have brothers. I did not have young male friends when I was young, and those that I were acquainted with obviously didn't have these conversations with me. I don't know how young boys are. So I could not tell you if they'd be talking about that kind of stuff. So that seems to be the main concern with this book. Did it make me a little uncomfortable at times? Was it a little bit too much? Yes, but I think everything that happens beyond that point, and honestly also, like she mentioned in the first part where we're following Cyril's mother up to the point where she gives birth to him, all of that other stuff was incredible and definitely overshadows that tiny portion of the book. So just power through it, guys. You can do it. So let's go on to the next book. This is book 10 out of 12. So we just have 3 more books to go through, guys. We're doing great. I am sitting down for this video and my tush is starting to hurt a little bit. But we are going to move on to Onder and Santi. We're here, which was a 5-star prediction. So I was very excited when I gave this book 5 stars. So I was correctamundo about my opinion on this book. So here is the synopsis of the story. This is a young adult queer story between a non-binary character, Onder is non-binary, and a undocumented young man named Santi. So this was a very enjoyable read for me. Let's see what people have to say about it. So down, down, down. Very few 1-star reviews. We only have 23. Let's see if anyone wrote a review on it. There is a couple. So let's see what Brayden had to say. This book just wasn't for me, mostly for the writing style. It's unfortunate reading a book and realizing an author you will never read again. The writing is just too slow. Maybe I'm not a slow burn kind of reader, but it was also really flat. Onder was kind of unlikable and Santi was just flat, and their relationship didn't seem grounded on anything apart from attraction. So this is kind of a, I wouldn't say it's a slow burn. It's definitely a instant attraction and then a gradual build as they start to get to know each other from the beginning. So in the beginning of their relationship, it does very much seem like their relationship isn't based off anything except for the fact that they're just really drawn to each other. But it definitely grows deeper through their interactions, which are kind of just day-to-day interactions. So if you see day-to-day activities as slow reading, then that is exactly what this book is going to be. So that this is a contemporary story. It's not an action, it's not a mystery, it's not a thriller, it's not a sci-fi, it's a contemporary where we're just following 2 people through their day-to-day lives. Onder is immature, ignorant, self-centered 19-year-old. At times, yeah, he is. He's very uncertain about where he wants to go. He's trying to figure out things for himself. He's focusing on him, and he does have a lot of character development throughout this story. So that's something to keep in mind. Do not base a character off who they are at the beginning of the story, because oftentimes that is used for character development. The worst part is they have no idea how privileged their existence is. Most people don't know how privileged they are until someone points it out or something happens for them to realize it. It's not something people just like know, especially when you are living not the rich, glamorous life that some people know. So he definitely starts to realize how he is in a position of power to do certain things and that his privilege protects him in certain ways. So once again, character development, you have to read the story to get that. Very little plot development, but my main frustration was the lack of characterization. I mean, seriously, who is Santi? I will say that when it comes to Santi, it is not spelled out too much who he is. I think you really have to kind of read between the lines. I personally felt like I had a good idea of who he was based off of the story, but it takes some work on the reader's part. The author really doesn't spell things out too much for you. You just have to base it off of what you hear in conversations and what Andre has to say about him and just the way that he interacts with Onder and things like that. For me, it worked. For other people who might need things spelled out a little bit more or just need more in general, it might not be enough. I would say that between the two characters, we do focus more on Onder than on Santi, but Onder is the main character. Like, we're following from their point of view, not Santi's. So there's that on that. So it seems like people just had some problems with the characters, and they just either didn't like the writing style or just felt like the author didn't have enough oomph to their story. I will say that at times the story was a little flat for me. Like, it didn't evoke emotions in me the way I thought it would until the very end of the story. So this was like a 4-star read for me. Then one scene kind of bumped it up to a 4.5, and then the ending bumped it up to a 5-star. So I can definitely see how some people may have issues with the writing, because at times I did as well. All right, so the second to last book is Seraph, which is the last book in the Monstrous book series that I read, and this is book 6. And let's go ahead and take a look-see-loo at what people thought. This one, I would say, if I were to rank the 3 Monstrous books that I have read, I would put Moth, I would put Gloam, and then I would put Seraph. I feel like Seraph just scraped the 5-star rating, but there were parts of this book that made me really emotional, and I really enjoyed that aspect of the story. Plus, I thought Seraph was just cute, and I thought their relationship was sexy, so so let's see, 40 people gave it a 1-star review, so once again less than 1%. Not surprising since we are continuing a series. So it looks like most of this is spoilery. So it says, this book was the start of the demise of the series for me. I wish the author knew to stop when they were ahead. So this is mostly spoilery, so I can't really read that. So, and okay, so well, I finished it and I like it even less now that I forced myself really contemplate what was so not right about this. In general, I feel like it was slow, not very engaging, and most of the book was spent with one character barely coherent and unable to communicate. The romance, I just remain completely unconvinced. It was simply not believable to me. So in the past couple books, in Gloam and in Moth, and as well as in a lot of other books, there is some traveling going on. The characters are going to other places. The world is expanding. That did not happen in this book. This book was set in one area, and in fact, one of our characters, Seraph, was in a cage for most of it. And yes, there were a lot of parts where he was not coherent because he went through some really bad medical experimentation on behalf of the military, and we are kind of watching him slowly recover from that to see if he can, 1, survive this situation, and 2, if he can control himself enough to become a regular member of the camp, if he can be integrated into society again. So this book is a slower development because it is not just about the romance. It is about watching someone who went through an incredibly traumatic experience trying to regain some semblance of humanity despite the fact that they are a monster, and being with someone who is often seen as possibly a psychopath. The character in here is named Lilac, and he's kind of the killer of the camp, and he doesn't really like interacting with a lot of people. There's a few people he kind of interacts with, but for the most part he keeps himself distant, and a lot of people kind of see him as the scary person who is more than happy to go around killing people and has absolutely no problem with it. So he is seen a little bit as a monster himself, and so we are kind of watching as these two perceived as fully monstrous people start to find someone who really understands them and values them and sees the good in them and sees them beyond the damage that they could cause. So it is definitely a slower paced stories than some of the other ones. This one I would say does not really develop the overarching plot that has been kind of touched on in some of the other stories. So I can see how this one could kind of break the flow of the series a little bit, but I do think that based off who our characters were and the situations they were in, it was kind of important for the author to take that time to develop their relationship and just focus really on the two of them. So I personally did not mind it, but I can see how people who have been reading the series kind of stop and go, that's different, and I don't know if I like that. So this person says 1.5 stars. The series has been somewhat of a gradual but steady decline of enjoyment for me, and the star ratings aren't nuanced enough to express. I really liked the first two books, but was disappointed but okay with the third one, more disappointed and less okay with the fourth, kind of sort of briefly perked back up with the fifth, and then it just plummeted. So if I were to talk about my ratings for these books, Soul Eater, which is book 1, I gave 5 stars. Edith, which is book 2, I gave 4.5 stars. The Reek, which is book 3, I gave 4 stars. And then there was a novella which was called Win, which I gave 4.5 stars. Then obviously the ones I've talked about, Gloam, Moth, and Seraph, have all been 5 stars. So while I did have a slight dip in the series there around book 3, since then I have been flying high. So I personally don't agree with that, because man, I was bored with this. Bored, annoyed, borderline squicked, and semi-tempted to DNF. I don't know what squicked means, but I personally was not bored with this story. But like I said, I do think it was slower paced and more confined than the other stories. So I can understand how some people think that. But I enjoyed this story. I thought that the way that the characters came together and the way that the author gave them the time and space they needed to heal was well done. So disagree with it being boring. All right, and moving on to the final book, and this one I just recently finished, and I would honestly say that this is one of my best books of the year so far. I absolutely loved it so much. So this is a contemporary romance, a male-male romance. It does have neurodivergent representation and select mutism as well. Let me open the synopsis for you guys to go ahead and check out. This is available on KU and it is by Emmy Sanders. So let's see. I feel like this is like one of the books where the 1-star reviews are really gonna hurt, where I'm gonna be like, why would you say that about my babies? All right, no surprise, it has very few 1 stars. This book so far, just in my circles, I've only heard good things, and I would be very surprised if someone didn't like it. But let's go ahead and see what people have to say. So 1 star. Let's see. I was expecting to cry and to feel emotional. I was ready and wanted it. Instead, I was ready for this to be over because of how bored I was. No. No, 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 no. I feel like some people just need too much in their books. There's such thing as a quiet book. There's such thing as getting to know people through their day-to-day activities and conversations. There doesn't always need to be some sort of excitement going on in their lives. Some people's lives are just normal lives. One of them is a corn farmer. The other one goes around the world taking pictures, which is fun to learn about, but isn't a big part of his story because he always wants to come home to his corn farmer. And that is totally fine to read about. This isn't really a bad book. It isn't. It's just not my type of book. So it's a personal opinion. It has things I didn't like. Everyone says no one writes childhood best friends to lovers better than Emmy, but I disagree. Personally, I don't like how Emmy writes childhood best friends to lovers. It makes me annoyed instead of emotional. I found this quite boring, not emotional. The Pining was okay. I don't know, but I don't see The Pining as good as everyone else does. There was definitely some pining, and there was some dramatic, like, confessions going on here, like, very dramatic. Like God was involved, kind of dramatic. If you've read the book, then you know. So I can't speak on the neurodivergency and Ellie's mutism for a personal perspective, but I did like how easily Lucky could read Ellis. Ellis being mute didn't define him, thankfully, and that was just a part of him. Childhood friendship was one of the favorite parts. I did really like that at the beginning of the book, there were like, they would say, I was 7 years old when I met Lucky. I was this old when this happened. And it kind of like went through and showed defining parts of their friendship before like getting into the main story. And I think that was a really great part of the story. So I'm glad they appreciated that, but it seems like they were just bored by the story, which I wasn't, because I'm a character-driven person and I absolutely love these characters. And my battery is running low, which is not surprising because I am also have my ring light clicked in here, so it's like grabbing energy from it. But this is the last book, so let's go. Boring and corny. Did they use the word corny because he's a corn farmer? Because I did not. I think there was definitely a few parts where they said things that were corny. If you read a romance book that doesn't have any corny lines in it, let me know, because you found the impossible. So I didn't think this book was corny. I did not, other than the mentions of corn, and I did not think it was boring. Would not recommend this book for neurodivergent rep. This has the infantilizing trope where the parent love interest talk about the main character's autism and how much of a struggle his upbringing was and blah blah blah, without the autistic main character in the room. Nothing screams romance like having your mom and lover talk about how to treat you like a human because your brain is different. There is a conversation where when the two of them are together, that the mom says, as you know, he is neurodivergent. And then she kind of talks about, they talk about how great he is. I don't know what else to say. As someone who's not neurodivergent, I can't say if that's an offensive thing to say. It's kind of like certain people perceive him a certain way, but you and me know the true him, because that's the reality of the situation. People have bullied him, they have called him the R word, they have looked down on him, they have certain expectations of who and what he is, and they have certain expectations of what someone with the label of autism is going to be like. And the two of them were like, that is the reality of the situation. That is something he needs to face. That's something we, as those who love him, have to face. But at the end of the day, we know who he is and we love him. And I don't think that's a bad thing to say. But like I said, I don't have autism. I don't know anyone who is diagnosed with autism. So what can I say about that? So that is their opinion on that. See, that's the thing. I feel like the author Googled, what does an autistic man seem like? Because I feel like they had a conversation about how a lot of people think people with autism are like, and how he isn't like that. Like, he's not your textbook autism character. So I'm a little confused about that statement, to be honest. So that's just my opinion. Unfortunately, a friend of mine talked me into it, even though I was currently already at the DNF point, and deleted it from my Kindle. So this person didn't even like the book and then just kept reading. So shit was mid. If a book is mid, don't give it 1 star. Give it like 2.5 stars. If a book is like really mid, like it is plain yogurt kind of situation and had nothing going for it, I give it a 2.5 star. A 1 star, but like I said, people rate books differently. I wanted to waste some time. Here is your book. You want to waste some time. Here's your book. No, that's kind of rude. Like this silly in love with best friend. I feared to tell him I would ruin our friendship, but guess what? He loves me too. Oh, my best friend don't talk, but I can read his mind. No, okay, this person completely misunderstood this story. Yes, they did not want to ruin the friendship because they did not realize that the other person cared about them that much, which is a common trope. If you don't like that trope, then don't read Friends to Lovers, because that is going to be the most common trope in a friends to lovers situation. So just don't read that trope if you don't like it. Also, my best friend don't talk, but I can read his mind. There is literally a line where Lucky tells Ellis, I can't read your mind. Like, he literally says that. Like, he's like, I need you to either tell me or write down what you are feeling, because while, yes, after years of being his friend, Lucky understands Ellis pretty much better than anyone else other than maybe his mother, he still sometimes needs Ellis to say things differently or to write them out or express his feelings in different ways. So that is not at all correct what that person wrote. So just ignore that person's review. They don't know what they're talking about. So that is that on that. Let's go ahead and stop that screen recording. All right, guys. So those are some 1-star reviews of the books that I have given 5 stars so far this year and my reaction to them. I obviously disagreed with most of them. Some of them I kind of understand. Do I understand giving a 1-star review to a book you were bored with? Because to me, a 1-star review really is hate, problematic. So 2 stars, sure, but you know, it is what it is. I would love to know your opinions on any of these books. I also am planning on doing a video later this month where I'm going to be talking about my top books and my lowest rated books of the year so far. And based off of these 5-star reviews, I would love to know which of these books you think are going to be my top 3 books of the year so far. All right, guys, I really hope you enjoyed this video. And as always, thank you so much for supporting my channel by watching my videos, and I hope to see you next time. Bye!